Today I'm going to go over how to solve a quadratic equation by factoring. Our objective for the lesson is how do we solve quadratic equations by factoring. There are 4 different ways we're going to learn how to solve a quadratic equation. The first method we're going to look at is factoring. Then we have the quadratic formula, completing the square, and taking square roots. Again, today's main focus will be to solve by factoring. When you solve a quadratic equation or function, you are finding the roots, the solutions, the zeros, and or the x-intercepts. These 4 phrases all mean the same thing. So if we were to graph a quadratic equation, the places where it crosses the x-axis are the solutions. Whatever the x values at those points are called solutions, also known as roots, zeros, and intercepts, x-intercepts. A quadratic equation can have 1, 2, or 0 solutions. When you graph a quadratic, if it does not cross the x-axis at any spot, it would have no solutions. If it only touches in one spot, it's going to have 1 solution, and if it crosses the x-axis in 2 spots, it will have 2 solutions. Here's an example that we're going to solve. We know that this is a quadratic equation because the highest exponent is an exponent of 2. Our first step is going to be to rewrite the equation by setting it equal to 0. We need to make sure it is in standard form, and we need to set it to equal to 0 because when we find the solutions, we're looking for the x-intercepts, which is where y is equal to 0. So we must set our equation equal to 0. Step 2 will be to factor using the appropriate method. In this example, it is a trinomial, so we're going to factor it by finding 2 numbers that multiply to -6 and add to -1, which is -3 and +2. These are our 2 factors. After we have our 2 factors, we're going to set each factor equal to 0. This is called the zero product property. In order to multiply 2 things to be, and the outcome is 0, one of the factors has to come out to be 0. So either x minus 3 is going to be equal to 0 or x plus 2 is going to be equal to 0. And that would make the product of these 2 equal to 0. Now we have 2 separate small equations. We're going to solve each equation for x. On the left side, we have x equals 3, and on the right side, we have x equals -2. This word or is important since x cannot be 3 and -2 at the same time. So 2 solutions that would work would be x is equal to -2 or x is equal to +3. We can check the answers to our solutions multiple ways. These are the solutions because when you substitute both of these x values into our equation, it's going to come out to be equal to 0. We can also check on our calculator by looking at the roots or the x-intercepts, and we can also find them on our tables. So when you substitute the numbers in, so if I substitute -2 in for x and I plug in x squared minus x minus 6, it will come out to be 0. Remember, that's what we want because we want the y value to come out to be 0. And the same thing, if I now store 3 in for x and I type in x squared minus x minus 6, I will also get 0. If I type this into y equals and I viewed my graph, I could see that it does cross the x-axis in 2 spots, -2 and +3. So remember, these are called our roots or our zeros. They're also our solutions, so we can clearly see that we did it correct. We can also go to our table and we're looking for the x-intercepts, which is where y is equal to 0. So if you find where y is 0 on your table, those are the matching x values, -2 and +3. So these are 3 different ways that we could check to make sure that we solved it correctly. Here's another example. In this example, it says x squared equals 6x. Our first step is going to be to rewrite it in standard form and set it equal to 0. Standard form is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, so we need to first move the 6x to the other side by doing the opposite operation. So we're going to subtract 6x from both sides, which is x squared minus 6x equals 0. Now we're going to factor this. In this time, it is a binomial, not a trinomial, so the appropriate method in this example would be GCF. The GCF of x squared and 6x is x. When we divide out the GCF, we are left with x minus 6. Now we're going to set each factor equal to 0. So we have just x is one factor and x minus 6 is the other factor. So x equals 0, that's going to be one of our solutions. And then x minus 6 equals 0 needs to be solved. And when we solve that, we get x equals positive 6. So our two solutions are 0 and positive 6. Now you're going to complete your foldable. Ignore this slide. We're going to complete our foldable and practice these examples.